Hi, Rohini.
Thank you so much for participating in this free webinar for the Soul Centered Series group. I'm really grateful for that. And thank you also for being one of the live webinar teachers in the program that starts in the fall. Really happy to have you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thanks for asking me. I'm really honored to be part of it.
And so for those who may not know Amy, Amy is the author of several books, but her best-selling book is The Little Book of Big Change. And she also has a support community that goes along with that, which is the Little School of Big Change that I've heard so many wonderful things about and know many people that have participated and are still in the community. And then you also just launched your new podcast, Changeable. So lots of exciting things happening for you.
Yeah, thank you.
And so one of the reasons that I chose you, Amy, to be one of the teachers in the group is that I've really been impacted by your work personally. I find that the way that you write about this understanding is extremely accessible and also extremely practical, and really helps me to see things more deeply and implement in my life in ways that are helpful and give me more peace of mind. And so I know that you didn't get to work, just like myself, I didn't get to ever meet Sydney Banks, and you didn't work with him directly, but his teachings have had a huge impact on you personally, and now you share that and help others by sharing the understanding. So I think we would really love to hear what your experience has been in terms of how the teaching and the understanding has impacted you personally, and then share how you're seeing it impacting others, if you're willing to go there for us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're big questions. It's like a big thing because there's so many ways that this understanding has impacted me. Some that I can just sort of recite that I know really well, but then I know there's so many ways that I'm not even aware of, or that'll just like pop up in a moment or a day or something of like, oh, I think that would have been different before. Or I think what I know or what I've learned about this, is really making this a different experience. So it's an interesting thing, but I guess, the most notable things that have changed in my life from coming across this understanding. I was always like many of us, I'm sure, watching, was kind of a seeker, was always just kind of trying to figure things out, was willing to do a lot of hard work to have the right life and the right feelings. And I thought it took a lot of hard work. So that's what I was left with. As I was just going to do it because I don't think there was another option. So yeah, I just kind of had a lot of anxiety at various points in my life. Habits, eating disorders, various habits, which I see now are just another way that anxiety kind of showed up and manifested. And my kind of go-to, like I think a lot of people's, it was to just get more serious, to work harder. Like, this can't be happening. I'm a go-getter and I'm not going to let this get me down. So I'm going to beat this thing, whatever this thing was. And I mean, that ranges again from multiple times a day panic attacks to, or really pretty severe at moments, eating disorder, to like, a fight with my partner or something, like whatever it was, like, this is not okay with me, and I'm going to better it, because that was just the whole mentality. So all my attempts to better it, kind of just took a lot of effort and a lot of work, and usually worsened it before they bettered it, because there was just this whole like rigidness and intensity and trying to change and manipulate everything. Again, in the most well-meaning way, because I thought, hey, if I want to be happy, I need things to be this way. I need to be free of these things. I need this kind of career, this kind of relationship, this kind of body, and that's the recipe for happiness. So it was a lot of work, and coming across the principles really unraveled that quite quickly, and continues to unravel that as time goes on, so just seeing, I remember the very first kind of big insight, I guess, if you want to call it this, that I had, was around hearing that we are well, that we're all equally mentally well, but we're just in this up and down thinking. Like, that's just how I'm saying it now. I don't know what was said, but that just made so much sense to me. It made so much sense. And in an instant, almost, it made a lot of things from my past click into a different view and make sense, where I had memories of myself pacing my apartment when I was in a panic attack, for example, and saying, oh, I was just really caught up. And I really thought there was something seriously, majorly wrong. I just didn't know. And then wondering why, an hour later, the panic attack had completely subsided and I felt like myself again. Like, what is that? And how even in those moments, that didn't really make sense to me. But, as we do, like from the understanding we're in, my mind made up some kind of explanation for it. Well, that's how this disorder works, or whatever it might be, So but to have that new framework that we're all okay and just feeling this moment to moment thinking, I mean, that, like I said, that still goes to work and just kind of unveiling things all the time. So, yeah, so the biggest ways I quit working so much on myself really started to kind of relax into my experience and see that it was okay. And as a result, I mean, anxiety is not a thing, not an issue anymore at all. Feelings come up, but I don't worry about things like that. My habits that I was in when I first found the principles really fell away. My relationship has changed for the better. My parenting I don't know that I'm a better parent, but it's a lot easier because I'm not in my head, like, I'm going to mess them up. Did I do the right thing? Did I do the wrong thing? Are they okay? And is this a sign of this? Like, I don't do that anymore. So, so it's easier for me to be a parent. And yeah, and it's awesome to get to share this. So my career's changed in great ways and so many things.
It's so amazing how powerful having a different relationship with that experience of anxiety is, because that's what I really hear you recognizing for yourself, is that as you saw that that wasn't something that needed to be fixed, that you needed to put your mind toward and your effort toward and your grit toward to eliminate that, that you developed a whole different relationship. And I just love any more thoughts around that, because I think that's so key for people. If there's anything else you'd like to say.
I mean, I think that I say this about a lot of things, but that, as you're saying, it just seems like so huge, like almost almost like, okay, if we can just see that, because it's like there was so much. I don't know why I do this, but I always think of like I use a river metaphor a lot, or like just the walls caving in, where it's like everything is so tight and rigid, and I can't have this, and I can't feel that, and this is a problem, and that's a problem. And all that does is just tighten us up and close us in. And just to see, wait a minute, what if it's all okay? What if none of it is even about me? It's just moving through me. It's just the way that little fluctuation of thought is kind of shining through me in this very moment. And there's nothing deep or stable or permanent about that. I mean, you go from this to this. It's like it just opens up. And then because we're so healthy, because that's our nature, whatever shows up just moves right through. So we feel that what we used to call maybe that unhealthy stuff or that uncomfortable stuff. We feel all kinds of stuff, but it has no like sticking power because we're wide open. When you're wide open, like what's it going to get stuck on? It's just a river that's just flowing, So yeah, I think that bit of, well, like if we learn to not fear our experience, that alone would change the world. I mean, really, like that's huge.
Yeah, it's profound. And so you're really bringing this understanding and that freedom of mind to the area of helping people experience more freedom from habits and, changing behaviors that they want to change in their life. And I know from my own experience working as a therapist and having that training, that the way that approaching it from an understanding that is about seeing the health and not having the habit or the behavior be wrong is pretty counterintuitive for a lot of people. And the typical way of approaching changing behavior is to focus on changing the behavior first, whether it's through willpower or through even with support. It's really focused on that's where the change has to start. So what are you seeing in that area, and what are you sharing with people that come up against stuckness in that experience?
Yeah, it's the most ironic thing in the world in a way, that the way we change so easily and naturally is by not trying so hard to change. By like focusing less on the behavior, by looking more at what we see and how open we are and what we're understanding about our experience basically, and how we work. I mean, change is happening either way, right? It wants to happen. It's our nature. We're constantly in flux, constantly changing. And it's just that when we don't know that, we freak out about all these little things. We call them problems. And then it's almost like we shine this spotlight on them, which kind of holds them in place a little bit. There's still this momentum in favor of change constantly happening. But if you eat something that you think you shouldn't have eaten, or you drink more than you think you should have drank, or whatever it is, like now you're like, ooh, this needs to change. Well, by definition, we're bringing it to life through thought and our experience, and kind of holding it there and looking at it and manipulating it and all this stuff. And knowing, like, seeing what we've seen about this, it's like, well, no wonder that just makes it worse a little bit, or certainly doesn't help it change. So yeah, I think it's the most ironic thing in the world that we are just constantly changing. And then everybody out there in the world is saying, change is so hard. Why can't I change? I don't know if change is possible. It's like, change is like, it's happening whether you see it or not. It's impossible to not be changing. It's just kind of getting our understanding on board so we can relax and let it happen.
And as you're sharing that, it does feel so much lighter to see that there's a natural momentum of change that is just innate in every single one of us, that we can't help but have new thought come in. That's just how we're designed. Yeah. And that's really the foundation of where that change comes from. And so I know in my work, and I've read in your work too, there's the word insights is used a lot for having new thought, and seeing how that's really the precursor to having sustainable change in our lives, that we have new thinking, we get a fresh understanding. And then from that, the behavior is able to shift. And I know that you've worked with, hundreds, thousands of people in seeing this. So any thoughts around what that looks like, what you've seen in terms of your clients and the people in your community, and what you've seen as possible, I think would be lovely for people to hear.
Yeah. I mean, so much is possible from people starting to get on to the fact that, there's actually a current of well-being moving through me. Like, that is a given. It's in there. And the less I interfere and try to change and do all the stuff, the better. Sometimes it's that for a bit. And then what's showing up is still, you should have worked harder, or I'm going to go sit on Facebook for 10 hours, or whatever they call their bad habit, drink more wine, smoke another cigarette, and still taking that bait sometimes, going with that, because sometimes that looks like the best we can see to do. But this is like at one end, and I see this a lot and I love it. It's where it's like, but they know better. And so it's like our machinery, our brain is still in the habit, because that's just what that machine's meant to do, is keep us alive by having lots of habits. But people kind of get onto that, and they're like, no, I don't need to fight that. I don't need to fear it. I don't need to make so much of it. And often that just opens this door. And then before they know it, these behaviors that they used to feel so compelled to do, just don't even have any appeal anymore. Or they just don't have that hold in the same way. So that's, there's an infinite number of ways insight shows up and like how people see it, but that's something that's so common. It's just seeing that. And then the behaviors that your brain still is telling you to do, because your brain, doesn't change overnight necessarily. That you just see, no, there's a bigger me. That's a machine, and I don't need to listen to that. And that no longer makes sense. Two, within the first 5 minutes of a conversation, people are like, wow, I think I got it. Now that's a little more rare, but it happens that way too. So it's just like how it shows up in the insights people have are all over the place. But what I love about this understanding is it's so comforting, especially when you're working with people and wanting to help them, to have something that's true and stable and not changing, of anybody you're going to talk with any issue in the world. I mean, as a professional in this field, like there is just no price you can put on that. It's like, this is likely to help. And it's true of everyone you're going to talk with, no matter what their specifics are. I mean, wow, like we can point them there. Now, when they see it and how they see it, that's up for grabs. But it's just amazing, as people that share this, you sleep so much better at night because you have a place to point that's very, very likely to wake something up for that person.
Yeah, that universal quality to the understanding where, like you're saying, like the way that the mind works is true for all humans. That doesn't change. And having the way that Sydney Banks shared this understanding, having a framework that is as simple as possible with the least dogma attached to it, to be able to point people towards their reference point for their innate mental health, their innate wellness, their infinite possibility that lies within them. Like, that's what's so powerful, and that it crosses all spiritual domains. It doesn't have to be limited to one specific practice. Like, no, this is for humanity. And when you're talking about helping people get free from habits, you're also recognizing, but it also applies to my relationship. Your relationship's better. Like, it impacts every single area of our life. And I think that the simplicity is where the depth is for everyone.
Yeah.
And in terms of not having had sort of the direct experience of working with Sydney Banks, what do you see as a way to help point people towards the understanding that is unique to them? So this is not about glorifying sort of a guru figure. He's emphasized in the program because he was the originator of the understanding. And I think that he had a huge impact on the world, and it's still rippling out and ongoing. But it's, I'd just love to hear what you have to say about, the purity in terms of just the teachings and not the person, and how that sort of shows up for you.
Yeah, it's a great question. To me, the teachings are really pure. Like you said, it's so simple, it's so universal. And that's definitely been a learning curve for me, and still is, of like sticking with, or like, having that main core essence focus of it be the principles. Like what just, what you can't possibly really add dogma to, like just the essence of it going right there, and I think, because you're right, like it's natural. Our minds just want to come up with the implications and come up with this, and that means that, and what should I do with this, and all of that kind of stuff. And so I just love that there is that simple kind of core. And for me, the whole thing, I would have loved to have learned from Sydney Banks, and met him personally. But what I hear a lot, and from the original teachers and stuff, is just how he was able to bring this about just by being himself, in that he's the perfect example of, there wasn't anything you had to learn. There wasn't anything you had to do. I mean, this was an uneducated guy who wasn't trying. I suppose he went to a marriage workshop, but he wasn't like trying to, achieve enlightenment at all. Just trying to have a little bit nicer life, like we all are, right? And he was doing absolutely nothing when this stuff started to unfold for him, nothing in particular, So just that this is in every single one of us. That's what I think is so special, it seems like, in his story, and I really respect him for not wanting to be this guru, and I love that there's like this historic piece of this that really is wanting to keep him alive, but at the same time, like seeing, okay, well, there's an essence. It isn't about him. There's an essence to the principles and the teachings that if you never even know who Sydney Banks is, you can still know about the three principles, and your life can be changed by them. So, it's a funny thing. It's a little bit of both.
Yeah, I love that. And how the essence is pointing to what we already know inside of ourselves. And I think that that's, what you're sharing in your school and in all your work. And that's what I'm pointing to as well. It's like every practitioner of this understanding is really pointing people to the wisdom that they have within. and that it's there whether we know to call it, whatever we want to call it. There could be many different labels on it. And I think all spiritual teachings are ultimately pointing to the truth that lies beyond the world of form. But with the ability to see that we don't have to work at it. For me, that was the difference in this understanding, that there isn't a practice that's required in order to access the wisdom, that it just is and just exists. And what are your thoughts around that being, how the teaching is different?
Yeah, it's huge, because I think as much as people want to say, oh, I get that meditation isn't, peace. It's just one practice, or yoga, or whatever it is we might do. As a human being, it's really hard to do that stuff consistently and not link them, like not think, oh, this is the thing I have to do, So I don't know, for me, let's just, again, it hasn't always been this way, but right now, today, like, that's so clear. Like, of course, that's a practice. And then this thing that we're tapping into is an always there thing that sometimes you'll tap into it through meditation, sometimes not, but that's tough to see sometimes, So that's what I love about just kind of divorcing those a little bit and saying, hey, do what you want to do whatever makes sense to you to do. But this is stable. This is always here, no question. And, however you feel it is how you feel it. I think it takes so much off of people. It keeps it simple. It takes all the complexity out, because with our practices too, it's so easy to, get anxious and I should have done it, or why didn't I do it longer? Or, it just adds so much messiness.
Yeah, it can add kind of a layer of innocent superstition to it. I know that I had that going, that I need to do certain things in order to be okay. And if I don't do those practices, then, my state of mind isn't going to be in a good place. And so there was real freedom, inner freedom, to be able to realize, like, this expression of who we all are is looking to express itself through us. It's not something that we have to make come to the surface. In a sense, it wants to spread and be communicated out into the world, and then we can ride that momentum rather than be the one trying to push and make it come forward. And that's really what I hear in what you're saying about how habits change, is that there's a natural momentum for change, and that there's an effortlessness that can be experienced around seeing how that is just how we're designed. And it doesn't mean that there might not be practice. It doesn't mean that there might not be back and forth with habits, but there's a way that we align with just how things work naturally that allows those habits to drop away. Am I saying that in a way that is congruent?
Yeah, definitely. Just the way I think of it sometimes, it's almost like everything just kind of eventually writes itself. Like, it moves through us, and because that is our design, it's self-correcting, it's self-writing, So it's like we can just come to see that, know that that's the truth. And then it naturally just, we don't have the how and why questions and the what should I do and what do I do now and all of those kinds of questions. They naturally fall away.
Yeah. And how did this unfold for you in terms of your work? Because was it sort of a gradual shift once you came across the understanding? Was it kind of like a quick pivot? Like, I'm curious about that journey.
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. I mean, as soon as I started to see something about this, I was working with clients at the time, and I mean, the conversations just started to change without me having to decide to change them. It just really started to change. And I'm sure there was a short period of time where it was kind of bringing in some of my tools, but maybe also pointing to this. But it doesn't feel like that was very long. It wasn't long before I saw, no, this is really kind of where it's at, and from day one, it was more effective than anything. It was just more helpful to people. It felt more true. And that's another really beautiful thing about sharing this, is that it's so easy in a sense, because it does so much of the work for you because it's like, you're just kind of telling someone something that deep down they already know. You're pointing them towards something that they've already touched. They touch it all the time. They already deep down know this. And we've all lived in this space and this feeling of it for at least the first few years of our lives, So it's not unfamiliar, even though sometimes there's a little thought and ego to get through to touch it again. Like it's right there. So it's easy.
Yeah, it is. And for me, when I was shifting to working this way, because previously I was feeling kind of tired and burnt out and didn't even know if I wanted to work with clients anymore. And it was so refreshing to see like, oh, when I can point to something universal, when it's simply like you're saying, showing people what they already know, it changes the whole experience of working with clients. So I was so grateful for that.
Yeah.
And then what was your inspiration behind your Little School of Big Change? Like where did that idea come from and what was your intention behind it?
Yeah, it really came from clients and readers of my book wanting more, and I think this understanding is something that's so awesome to be in community around. Historically, or at least when I first came across this 7-8 years ago, whenever it was, a lot of the work was still being done in like a 3-day retreat or a 2-day workshop. And that's a wonderful, or like a deeper dive immersion. And those are all wonderful ways to see this. But for me, I mean, I got a lot of what I saw from the principles from the 3 Principles movie site, from not even attending live events for the first year or so, just kind of listening to anything I could get my hands on. And it was incredible to me what a difference that made, like that, that. And I'm like, wow, I think I really kind of saw something big in those first few months, from some videos that were kind of old and just, I didn't know who these people were. So that kind of told me, wow, there's such a potential here to be in a community, be in conversations that aren't necessarily all in person and just reach more people. So a lot of it was that. It's just like this is definitely like the time has come. We are ready. Like this is rippling out in gigantic ways, and we are so ready for it. And it's just kind of the intersection between us being ready and the technology now being here, and that it makes sense to do it in a big way like that.
It's wonderful that you can have a community and have such a huge impact in terms of the number of people that can share in the learning and share in the the group experience, which I think is so powerful as well. There's wonderful benefit in the one-on-one deep dives, but I also really love the energy of the group and how that's so impactful for learning as well.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I hear more than anything that people say is the biggest benefit. Nothing I say, none of the lessons I created, honestly, not even anything I'm teaching, or not even like that personal coaching, which is what everyone thinks they want. Everyone's like, oh, well, I get my own private stuff answered and all of that. I mean, really, inevitably, after a few months, everyone's like, it is so beneficial to be in this group and to see how we're all the same.
Yeah.
All the time, like, oh, I just saw that I have these thoughts and take them seriously. And that lady over there in Scotland has hers. And that guy over there in Singapore has his. And we're all exactly the same. The content is different and everything else is totally the same. And just the insights that brings for people. So again, it makes our job easy. It's like, put them together, share your stuff, you know what I mean? But like, they are truly seeing so much from each other just by seeing what we all have in common.
Yeah, and that's beautiful to come back to kind of how powerful seeing the universality of our humanness is, and our divine nature, how we want to label that, but that is universal amongst all of us. And I might be having, anxiety over claustrophobia, and then my husband Angus might be having anxiety over his fear of heights, but it works the same way, even though the content's different. And for me, I spent many years, kind of like what you were saying at the beginning, really pushing and trying to change, really thinking that there was something wrong with me, and then I needed to fix that. And what this understanding did is help me see like, oh, this is the human experience, and you don't fix the human experience. You have it, and you let it move through you, like you're saying, but there's nothing broken about it. And even when the experience is uncomfortable, I was using that as a cue to mean that there was something wrong. And then I would go into my coping mechanisms, whether it was, overworking or, binge watching movies or, chewing my cuticles. Like those were the ways that I would try to navigate not an uncomfortable experience, but an experience that I thought meant something was wrong with me.
Yeah.
Because I can be with discomfort. But as soon as I add that extra layer of like, oh, this is a problem, then I need a coping mechanism to deal with it.
Yes. And that, I mean, it's ginormous to see that the stuff that moves through us is not personal. It really is not personal. It's like we have, like, I think of our brain as just like this filter sometimes, and like we have our own little habitual filters, and that energy that's coming through, that's bringing anything to life within us. Sometimes it has to get through the physical machinery. It kind of passes through that filter, and then so it spits off in the direction it's used to spitting off in. But so what? If we don't have to be stuck with that, and we don't, it's wanting to come up and then just get washed away. But we're like chasing after it and like examining it, So it's like, if we just be in that place of like letting it just come up and wash away, yeah, it's amazing how quickly change happens, and yeah.
I love that image of chasing after it. Like I could see that. It's like I'd have the anxiety and the anxiety gone, but now I'm chasing after it, kind of go, what was that? Where did that come from? How do I stop that ever happening again? That was terrible.
Exactly. A client last week said that she had an image of that, of like this thought coming up, and then it would be like leaving, and she'd grab it by the tail and like bring it back in, so she could look at it and fix it. I'm like, what? It's gone. It was halfway out the door, but that's what we do.
Yeah. And then we pull it back in, and then we add a few more on top of it. Mm-hmm. and now I can laugh about it. Before, when I didn't understand that, it would be really serious. And that's also what you were saying at the beginning. Like it felt like emotions and, insecurity, like that was something serious that I needed to really kind of figure out. But being able to kind of see the quirks of our humanness, then it becomes kind of funny. And now I look at some of the crazy things that I still think or do, and it's kind of humorous. Maybe not in the moment that it's happening, but afterwards I'm much more quick to be able to see, oh, I just was like totally out of my mind in that moment. And look at how it works. Now I'm stable again. So for me, having a fresh experience with my humanity has been such a great gift from this understanding, and that goes hand in hand with the deeper connection with that unchanging part of ourselves, that formless nature.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing, like just the space that comes up, where this stuff shows up, but it just isn't, we're not collapsed with it in the same way. Like you said, you can look at that and be like, oh, isn't that funny? I got caught up in that, even if you don't in the moment, who cares? Like, it's just, there's a whole new relationship with it. And like we were saying, like both of our early experiences, I mean, it's such a blessing to just not have to call that a problem and work on it. It's not a problem. It's really not a problem.
Yeah. Well, I just so grateful to you personally in terms of the impact that you've had on my life. I'm grateful for our friendship. And if there's anything else that you feel like you'd like to add that we haven't gotten to, is there anything else that you'd like to mention before we finish up?
Just one thing that popped in my head as we were talking about Sid, and then like Sid the person, and then this experience and that essence, is how I just had a memory of fairly early on in this, seeing so much about the implications, like, oh yeah, we all live in separate realities and we're all psychologically innocent. And that was huge. I mean, it's, amazing things to see. But I had some really amazing, first generation teachers who were featured in the Soul Centered series as mentors at that time, who were very, very good and very consistent at bringing me back to the principles. And saying, yeah, like those are great implications, but people are going to see whatever they see. Like, it's like we say in my school all the time, like, just see, it's just thought brought to life, full stop, period, stop there. And I think there's just so much in that, like, again, the essence of this is so true and so simple that when we look there, whatever we need to see from it, we'll see. So I guess, I don't know, I just had this little moment of like so much gratitude for those early teachers of mine that kept me like just focused on the purity of it, and kind of seeing now how years later, like, wow, yeah, that was so helpful. So, yeah.
Well, that's great. And that is such a powerful reminder, because it's so, I can completely relate. When I was first exposed, I wanted to go into application, like, oh my God, how do I apply this here? How do I use it there? What does this mean here?
Mm.
And again, from learning from those first generation teachers, the pointing was to come back to deepening the inner experience and grounding within myself. And from that, however that's meant to show up, whatever the to do is in life, it will show up in the moment, real time,
Yeah.
and be revealed as needed. And to really support people with having that deepest level of impact within themselves, to come back to that rather than helping them to see how to apply it.
Yeah.
To really see that the leverage is in all of us, coming back to what we know and seeing more of what's really true inside of ourselves in whatever way it looks to us, because it's going to look different for everybody. But the feeling of what's true is the guidepost, as I see it, like to keep going in that direction inwardly. And then the outside, like you're saying with habits, it kind of takes care of itself. Like it's almost magical in a way. It's like, how did that happen?
Yeah. I mean, and that's the, again, like kind of the blessing and the challenge in it, is that when someone wants help with a habit or something, I mean, that is where our mind wants to go, and it will go there and check on it and want to apply it there and all this kind of stuff. But that's why I think it's so important to just keep reminding people that, like, no, just see how this works, period. Because that is, if you want, the fast lane to change, that's it. It's not, well, let me see if I can apply this over here. No, it's just look at the essence and let that unfold within you. Because like you said, whatever needs to change in that bigger way or wants to change will. It's not our ego saying, I want these things to change in my life. It's that change really coming from the inside out.
Yeah, and letting it have that organic timing. Like for myself, my ego was like, oh, I'm going to use this understanding so that I feel less insecure.
Yeah.
Well, I saw that wasn't a good idea, which was a really good first start. But what I noticed shift most initially was my relationship with Angus. And so that was like, wow, that's just transformed. And then sort of as I look at things over time, I recognize, oh, and my insecurity went down, but that wasn't the first place. And if my ego had been like, that's what has to change now, my relationship's fine. That wasn't even a problem in my mind at that point. I thought it was really good, but that's where it started. And so I think really being open to letting the shifts happen and the timing that they happen, knowing that feeling that is coming through us has a wisdom within it that knows exactly where it needs to go, and that we don't need to manage that at all.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Amy. It's been wonderful. I've loved this conversation. It's so nice to connect with you. And I know that the groups can be very grateful for you sharing with them. And I look forward to the live webinars that we're going to have in the 6-month program.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Take care. Bye-bye.